All right, so without further ado, please help me welcome Madrean Schober, please. All right, now, this is you, and it should be all good to go. And then just click that if you want to go forward, and if you need anything.
Yeah, okay. I confess we've misnamed the workshop. It's really not about our personal experiences. It's really a sex education, sexual experiences workshop. At the end of the conference, we're going to do something new. It's not a total joke. One of my current partner loved to learn this thing about me, and that is that part of my clinical experience in starting experiences working in family planning was having to attend a lot of workshops on how to do sexuality education, sex education. I lived in, if you're familiar with the Kenzie report and Kenzie research, I lived in the city where Kenzie lived. And so we talked about it all the time, sex all the time. And I have two daughters, and one of my teen daughters, when she was a teenager, said, "Mother, I'm having company. Could we please not talk about sex at dinner tonight?" So anyway, just a little aside. Karen and I are, I think, both lively speakers. We have had a lot of leadership experiences, and we certainly want to share those with you. But I think we both find it rather boring to have to listen to a lecture too long. And we would like to hear something from you, what your personal experiences are, and what you might have questions about, or what you might have to offer. So I'm going to talk for maybe just a few minutes, although I tend to get carried away talking. And then Karen's going to talk for a little bit, and then we're going to turn this into an interactive workshop, which we both like, and sort of go from there. I think we're both open to questions, comments, critiques, whatever, as we move through the workshop. It's nice to have something fun, I think, when you're heading towards the end of the conference. Well, as I was thinking, I will have to admit, I don't talk about myself. It may look like I talk about myself a lot. I really don't. And I have had a very interesting life, a very privileged life, taken a lot of turns along the way. And people have even said to me, not only Julianne, but people have said to me, "Why don't you write a book?" And I thought, well, how boring. I mean, sit down. I'm not a memoir type person. So I had to think a little bit, and I wasn't really totally comfortable about this request to do a personal experiences workshop, to be honest with you. Although I'm more than willing to share some of my experiences, not all of my experiences. And so I started thinking about it, and just 2 months ago, I went to my 50th first nursing program reunion, and you sitting there and going, somebody is walking with a walker, somebody is, still changing the world and so forth. And one of my fellow students said, "Oh, the most interesting person there was Madrean Schober because of blah, 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 blah," and which made me nervous. But it made me think, as this request about personal experiences came in, about what did I look like, what was I thinking when I was a nursing student. And I'm cleaning out my house, and I'm cleaning out my garage right now, and I found this photo, the young woman, probably, I can't remember how old I might have been, maybe 18 or 19 or something. And, in those days we had the starch pinafores and the starch hat, and we had lessons in how to iron our hat, and all of that. I mean, I had 2 lessons in how to iron my hat. And of course, that was a generation. But when I started looking at the picture of myself, and then thought, well, this is the photo that's been used for this conference, and it is a fairly recent photo. I thought, what was that young woman thinking? And I would have to say, I was confused. All I wanted to do was graduate. I wanted to work in a hospital. I had pretty much picked out the hospital. I wanted to work in medical surgery unit, which is what I worked in. I had no idea. I've never been out of the country. One of the other students in my group came back from one of these student exchange programs. She'd been on an airplane. I'd never been on an airplane. I thought, how could she get on an airplane and go this and that and this and that? I mean, I had no clue. I was rather shy, which nobody believes anymore. And I was far away from home. In those days, 250 miles was a long way. And so the idea of sort of crystallizing what happened from the point of this young nursing student. There were a lot of moments of uncertainty, a lot of times when I just wanted to get away from it all. I did do the traditional thing. I was a nursing student. I met my husband. I got married. I enlisted in domestic servitude for 2 months. And my husband came home one day. He was a professor, and he came home and he said, Madrean, I was crying. He said, I think you need to find something else to do, which was, I'm thinking about what stimulates you to do something different. What stimulates you to or motivates you to take a risk or to work through your fear or work through your doubt. In that case, I thought he was going to divorce me if I didn't figure out something else to do. So I had graduated from a diploma nursing program, which in the United States at that time was 3 years, and then enrolled in, we were living on a university campus in, I had a double major in psychology and sociology, and I went to my first classes and I went, government, art appreciation, music, oh my God, this big world. So it was a little world for other people on campus, wasn't it? But for me, it was everything that nursing education was not. I've always been curious. I've always, even in my shy phase, embraced innovation. As a girl, I used to ride buses a lot because we didn't have any other transportation. And I remember as a young girl standing on the street watching people, curious about why did they look that way or why were they doing that. I'm maybe 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 years old, so I've always been curious about people as human beings, which I think then led to, even to this day, having made a lot of changes, I still connect very deeply about human compassion, and which I think connects so beautifully to primary health care, which then connects to the joy I have in being at this conference, to be honest with you. My passion, my curiosity has always been linked to some kind of injustice. I was very much immersed in women's health and very much an activist and poster child for women's rights. I honestly was so naive about women's health that I couldn't believe the injustices that were occurring in my Midwestern city in Indiana in the United States. And so then that actually led to my being in clinical practice. And I started out doing counseling in a family planning clinic, and the clinic was a little blue house off in the corner on the edge of town where nobody could see it, because after all, people really weren't supposed to have sex if they weren't married. And we were also in a rural area, and we were doing abortion counseling. And at that point in time, the only place that anyone could do, and I'm talking about teenagers, and the only place that young women could go would be New York City, the only place. And so we were doing counseling, offering options, offering contraception, but also sending them with a map and money to New York City, 14, 15, and 16-year-old girls. And that was quite an opening, and it started, my husband said that the downfall of our marriage was the assertiveness training course I took. And my husband died, by the way, 23 years ago, so he had his positive sides too. But it's that idea that there's an injustice, there's something, why doesn't somebody say something? Why doesn't somebody do something? And in the whole process of, as I was working, the nurse practitioner role emerged in the United States, and I was working as a director of a contraceptive clinic with a group of doctors, and they knew that I was interested in doing more. What can I do that's beyond what I'm doing now? And so I agreed at the last minute, after moving around a bit with my husband, to enter the nurse practitioner program. I had 1 week notice and told my husband he had to take care of our 6-year-old and 8-year-old, and this professor of mathematics was crying in the kitchen, how could he do this? And I said, I think you can learn how to work this washing machine. I'm sure you can do this, because that generation men. And I would have to say, over the years, going from, I have some very wise things that my brother put on the website, my website, for me that I want to share from you because they were things I found in one I wrote. But I think that was the beginning of this idea, this quote, one's mind, once stretched by a new idea, never regains its original dimensions. I could say that day and night and really feel that that's true. What does it mean? Does it mean watching my grandson put on pink nail varnish on his nails and watching his father, who's a little homophobic, get nervous about it? Okay, how are we going to deal with this in the family? But really, once you start, and it's the experiences and it's the education and all this shifting of your mind. It's a zigzag path, oftentimes, and I'm sure many of you have experienced that, and maybe probably had more experience than I have as far as in leadership roles. I've been an activist. I was the inaugural chair of the ICN network, not knowing where we were going to get money for the Nurse Practitioner, Advanced Practice Nursing Network, different positions in associations and so on. And at the time that I was still in clinical practice, I sort of veered from being educated as a Christian in the United States to more of a connection with Buddhist principles, and also the sage, the belief beyond myself, the knowing that there's something bigger than myself that I can't understand. And so the therapist that I was seeing at the time had someone do an astrological chart for me. And I thought, well, what is this? And so I answered all the questions and did everything that I was asked to do. And he said, well, you're going to write a book in 5 years. I mean, I was not on that path at all. And I said, okay. Well, I wrote the book in 2005. And it's maybe it's the first book that I've written. And many people have written many, many books, but I did not have that on my agenda. And I think this quote, the work of a woman visionary, and I am thinking that all of you are visionary in some way or you wouldn't be here, is to know the past, dream the future, and take action in the present. Sheila Sophia McLeod is one of our Native American writers in the United States. This happy little person, which has the same blouse on as in the other photo, I was actually doing workshops in the Philippines, and I was working with nurses. And I told the story earlier that since I had gone away from the Christian church, I was back into a country that was 99% Catholic, and we were doing workshops for 2 weeks with 40 participants. Okay, we're going to do leadership and development. We're debating what is leadership, what is management. And as I arrived with my Australian, by the way, co-worker, they said, well, so-and-so is in charge of the prayers for the day. And I went, prayers? And I myself, not being raised Catholic, had to become accustomed to prayers as we arrived, prayers before lunch, and prayers at the end of the day. And it really, I had to think about it. I had to really think about it. But for them, it was so natural, and it really set a nice tone as far as the work that we did. And they were beautiful. They were sharing. They were tolerant, and they added to this view that I have, that I'm a visionary, but I have a vision that can constantly be expanded and enlarged and renewed, I suppose, if you will. But being a visionary, I'm also thinking that many of you have experienced this, is somewhat of a solo path. You can work in teams. You can talk to other people. I have a lot of good friends, especially women friends. I have a partner now that actually lives in the UK, and we're very close. But a lot of the thinking, the vision, the dreaming, the decisions to take on this leadership role, I think, is really a solo path, and people, sometimes, especially women, aren't very comfortable with owning their own space, being present in their own space, because to me, if I'm thinking about leadership, to me, leadership is innovative. It's something new. Management is something you can keep being promoted in various capacities, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're leading. It just means that you're rearranging how you do the management. An opinion. And so I think this idea of having space is ever more important because we're so busy. I can't believe, even walking between Swiss Hotel and this hotel is jammed with people. And when I was studying Spanish, I was studying with a woman from Costa Rica, and we were studying a little book called Solitude. And I kept thinking, solitude, and it was talking about being in the middle. How do you gain solitude when you're in the middle of a busy, busy city? Or when people are saying you have to go here, you have to go there. I really feel to establish credible leadership that you need to accept that it's also a solo path. And if you expect too many paths on the back, you may get a few, but not as many as maybe you'd like sometime. Again, I was a little bit challenged when my brother said, I want to construct a website for you and give me some quotes, and I say, oh, come on, you know me, just do something. And he was an artist and doing something very arty for my website, and I said, okay, I'll find something. But I do also like this one very much, and that is, do not follow where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. I think that is also another solo path. You probably will experience as many failures as successes. Accepting failure. I don't like conflict, and failure makes me nervous. But you can't really move forward, I think, unless you have some of these failures along the way. And with my personal experiences and leadership, I think most of the time, if I've been a champion for something, if I've stood for something, if I've made decisions that are unpopular, it's usually a deviation from normal and commonly held attitudes. I mean, I have these going through my mind right now, sitting in this primary health care conference and wondering what more the nurses could be doing and what you're interested in doing and how you see that path. What's the deviation? What is the deviation, and why do you have to accept anything? I'm a person, when I look at a healthcare center or a healthcare system, I don't necessarily see it anymore with a doctor present. So when someone makes a circle and puts the doctor at the edge of the circle, I go, oh, why would that have to be? You need a consultant somewhere in there. That's my deviation from some of the usual and customary ways that we look at healthcare systems. Some of the issues that I think you face as far as leadership and development are discrete. I told a little bit of my story at the opening keynote about how I entered into the arena of international consulting. The issue of my husband dying was quite a shock, but that did open a whole new world for me. I didn't have someone else in my life that I had to consult. My children were grown, they were at university. But I was not happy in my clinical practice for a lot of reasons, and I had to give a 1-year notice because I was a business partner, and so the contract indicated that I had to give a 1-year notice to my patients, some had never seen a doctor for 20 years. But I was unemployed, which is a big thing, being alone for 2 weeks. What should I do? What should I do? What should I do? And I did receive this call to do this 2-year research project. And I would have never thought. It's just like the whole world exploded for me. What am I going to do? Where am I going to go next? And it was a 360-degree turnaround. And I mention that because for me, really true leadership not only is innovative thinking, but taking risks, working your way through doubt. If something is presented to you and you go, oh, no, that's not going to work, there is always an option. There is always an option. It may not be the optimal option, but there is always an option. And maybe the most difficult option may be the option that will be the biggest game changer in your life. I'm going to finish soon, Karen. This is my own. Pursue knowledge and embrace wisdom. We go to courses, we go to conferences, we go to university, and we can gain any kind of knowledge possible, read more books. I'm still a book reader, but I can learn how to read things online as well. And I was in Bhutan not too long ago, and this was one of the monks. And you probably, those of you who have traveled to that area of the world will recognize that's a prayer wheel. I have prayer wheels on my tables in my apartment at home. And when you look at the monks, especially the monks that have that experience, you have that sense of wisdom when you look at their face. And if, as you meet people, I've met people here at this conference that have, I start talking to them, and you can just see that wisdom coming through, because they've probably had difficult lives, they've had a lot of successes, but they also have gained some wisdom and openness about the way that they approach life. So I'm not sure that everything that I can share with you, and I can tell you more about if you want to hear about the failures, I can talk about those too, but it's not as much fun. But if what I have to share with you is helpful, or Karen is going to add to this as well. But I think risk-taking and facing your fears and facing your doubts, it could be the biggest thing you fear is the thing you should do.
Yeah.
We have another mailer? Yeah. So anyway, that's just sort of an introduction. It's not everything you want to know about Madrean Schober, and it's the best I could do given that I'm not comfortable about talking about Madrean Schober. But I'm now going to turn the microphone over to Karen, and then we're going to work with you and hear what your experiences are and what you want to share with the group. Okay?
So, I've got a question to ask of you before I talk about any of my experiences. And my question is, how many of you have sat down and actually planned your career? Sat down and said, okay, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and then, I think I'll do that. Anyone? Has anyone in this room actually planned their career? No. All right, so then my next you have?
In response to that, I would say when I've planned a couple of years from now,
yes,
doing study or whatever, that's fine. But I've found in life that you don't know what's around the corner. You can't anticipate it. So I don't feel planning my future is. It could be.
I'm talking about planning your career.
You just don't know what opportunity might pop up.
Okay, so then my next question is. So my next question is, who in the room is enjoying? Yeah, excuse me.
Sorry, would you like me to do a better job facilitating?
Honest to God. So then my next question is, who in this room is enjoying a rewarding career?
Yes.
Or has? Who loves what they do? Who's really passionate about what they do? Nurses are more passionate about their jobs than they are about their husbands, in my experience. So it's a fascinating thing, isn't it? That this lack of career planning, but this seizing of opportunities can lead to these intensely rewarding careers that we all experience. So yesterday I told you a little bit about some of my journey through my nursing career, and the purpose of that obviously was to illustrate the fact that all of these workforce planning problems we experience today we have experienced along the way. What I wanted to do today was share a little bit more of some of my story from a slightly more personal perspective, because what I'd like us to think about exploring here is how some of this seizing of opportunities leads to personal growth and also leads to career growth for us as professionals. And then drawing on the conference theme about thriving through change, because seizing opportunities enables us to thrive through change. I also wanted to talk a little bit about driving change as nurses, because there was something that was said to me this morning when all of the award recipients were being introduced, and I had been told by Kathy Bell that APNIS struggles to get people to nominate themselves for the awards. And it's because all of these people who do these truly amazing things on a day-to-day basis go, but, oh yeah, but I only did this. Oh no, but surely someone is doing something more important than me. This amazing self-effacing attitude. And one of the award people had achieved quite a remarkable change against quite significant opposition within the practice where she worked. I'm not exactly sure which award recipient it was, but the chair of the conference steering committee was sitting next to me and she said, yes, when we spoke to her, she said, yes, but I didn't have any support to do that. And she said, we said to her, that's why you're getting this award, because against all of those obstacles, you managed to achieve this. And I think that's really remarkable. And I think that would be worth us exploring, how we can drive change against all of these obstacles, because, it's quite clear that through our willingness to seize opportunities, we develop the skills to do these things. So, some of you have been to the HWA stall over the last 2 days, to the booth. Helen and I have been doing a fire sale, as you know. Yeah, we got rid of the condoms quite quickly, yeah, quite quickly. Actually, Ansel had the condoms, thanks Patrice. Anyway, we don't do that at HWA. We practice abstinence at HWA, abstinence. Oh, jeez, bloody hell. Anyway, so some of you have been to the HWA stand and we've been joking about how we're having a fire sale because, as you know, HWA has been defunded from the 30th of June and the programs and functions are going to be absorbed into the Department of Health. So, for me personally, this is the second time in 4 years that I'll be out of a job. I'll have been made redundant. Now, the last time that I was made redundant, it was when the ANMC, the Australian Nursing and Midwifery Accreditation Council, so I was the previous CEO of that when it was called ANMC. And so when it secured appointment as the accrediting body, I was made redundant and had to reinvent myself. Let me take you back further. My husband and I, the man that I got engaged to 6 days after we met, after that one night stand, on Great Keppel Island. Yeah, 2 spontaneous things I ever did in my life, and that was the first. I'm not telling you about the second. But I digress. So, we've been married 30 years this year. So in our 30-year married life, this will be the 4th time that one of us has been made redundant. The first time that he was made redundant was in 1991 in the recession that Mr Keating said we had to have, and you'll all remember that. I was at home doing domestic servitude. I had 3 children under 4. Yes, I know. I should have used the Ansel condoms, but it's a whole nother story. And he arrived home and the company he was working for had gone belly up and he had no job. And clearly I wasn't working at the time. We'd not long moved to Canberra. We had been unable to sell our house in Bowral. Interest rates were 19%. So we were topping up the mortgage, we were paying the rent. I had these 3 gorgeous little children. And then hubby came home and he didn't even get his final salary. He didn't get his entitlements, no redundancy package, utterly nothing, like we had nothing. And so it was a wee bit challenging. So we sat down and we said, all right, let's both apply for jobs. First person to get a job goes to work and the other one stays home with the kiddies. So I was a nurse. I got a job at a small country hospital as the Deputy Director of Nursing, about a half-hour drive away. I went back to work and he stayed home. And after about a year or so, he got some work, and then after another year, he managed to get full-time work. And then I was able to stop that job and then go and work part-time so that I could spend more time with my children, because for that 2 years, my middle child had refused to allow me to do anything for her. Because she said, my daddy will do that. Because she was pissed off, because first of all I had another baby and then I shot through. So she was pretty unhappy. My husband and I reflect upon this time quite often, and we've reflected on it quite a lot lately as we're viewing the future of, the 30th of June and will I have a job or will I not have a job and what will I do? And we believe quite firmly that it is one of the best things that ever happened to us. Absolutely. Financially, the setback was quite significant and the effect was felt for many years. But we each now know exactly what it is to be the primary breadwinner. We each know exactly what it is to be the primary caregiver. And the relationship that he developed with those children through being their primary caregiver, many men never get to have. And so we thought for us, that was one of the best things that ever happened. So we achieved, as a family, as a couple, enormous personal growth out of that terrible adversity. From a career perspective, it didn't hurt me because I then, got a job and then got another job. So that wasn't such a bad thing. When I left ANMC, that was quite a different story. I'd spent 5 years attempting to convince my board that the National Registration Scheme would happen and that they needed to be active about it. They weren't really terribly interested in hearing that story. We're in a cone of silence, just to remind you. And the ANMC needed the support of all of the nursing organisations in order to secure appointment as the accrediting body. One of our constituents was unhappy because they had fancied this for themselves and had written to all the ministers and said, ANMC, you shouldn't touch them with a barge pole, essentially. And they had persuaded another organisation to take the same view. And we were struggling to find what it would take to get this other organisation to support us because we believed that having an accrediting body was what nursing needed under the National Registration Scheme. Now, for those of you who don't know, every other profession that was entering the scheme had its own accreditation body, and nursing did not. Now, my view was nursing needed what everyone else had. We needed our own accreditation body. That was the best thing for the professions, for nursing and midwifery, that we had an accreditation body. This one organisation would not support us. They had been influenced by another body and they were working hard against us. And we had to find the key. So I went to the chair of my board and I said, I have the key. I have the answer to this problem. And the answer is that we put my job on the table. And what we do is we go to that organisation and we say, not only have we changed the constitution that you will be a member of the new body and you'll have a seat on the board, but we're going to spill and fill the CEO job so that it becomes open to everyone, and Karen will step down. So that was me putting my career on the line. I'd been in that job for 5 years. I loved that job. I loved regulation. Nothing would have given me greater pleasure than to stay and then take that organisation through the change process. But it wasn't about me and it wasn't about what I wanted. Nursing and midwifery needed an accreditation body, and the way to get it was for me to give up my career. And so that's what we did. The chair of the board was very alarmed and very concerned, and I said, no, trust me on this one. So we set up a meeting with the other organisation, we sat down with them and we said, here's the deal. This, and the CEO job. They were there in a flash. So that's what we did. So nursing got an accreditation body, which is great. That's what we really needed, because the other alternative just wasn't going to work. And I stepped down and said, right, well, now I'm going to have to reinvent myself. Whatever will I do with myself now? All I've done is regulation for the last 5 years. It's all I kind of know. And I'm really not sure what I'm going to do with myself next. So I had 6 months off work. Now, the last time I'd had 6 months off work, it was with one of those babies. Fortunately, I hadn't had to lose my girlish figure again just to have this 6 months off. And I reflected. I spent an enormous amount of time reflecting. And I learnt a number of things. I learnt that it's possible to be a valuable person and a valuable member of society without having to say, this is my job. That we are valuable in our own right. That was a really important lesson. I learnt that you can actually get through the day without having to go to work. That was an important lesson, because I'd been fearful. Like many of us, you're on this constant treadmill, and I was fearful about, if I don't go to work every day, what will I do? You can actually get through it. You can actually manage. And I used the opportunity to think, what are a couple of things that I've always wanted to do that I've never done? So I went out and did a course to become a marriage celebrant. I can do actually weddings, naming ceremonies, funerals, same-sex. If you need me, come to speak.
Sex therapy.
Sex therapy. I can do it. So I went off and did that. I had always had an interest in doing volunteer work on a board, and I had done the company director's course. So I applied for a position on a board, and that board is Carers Australia. And they advocate on behalf of carers, unpaid family carers. Some of you in the room may well be carers. Any of us at any tick of the clock could become a carer. My husband could have a stroke tomorrow and I could find myself caring for him. And so we advocate for those people, and we get money from the government to do service delivery for those people. So they took me onto their board because they were looking for someone with a health background. So I've been doing that work. I get paid $42 a day for those board meetings, so it's hardly the path to fame and fortune. It's immensely and intensely rewarding work, and I'm now the president of that board. So there was another growth opportunity that came because I'd given up my job, and I'd given up my career, and I'd taken stock and thought, what will I do next? So I became a celebrant, got myself on the board, and I went and did a little bit of volunteer work. I rang up Volunteering ACT. I went in, I had a little chat to them, and next thing you know, I was their receptionist. So a good receptionist, not on your Nelly. But they asked me if I'd like to stay on and become their CEO. So it was all terribly, terribly interesting.
Look for the opportunity.
Look for the opportunity and grab the opportunity. So the other thing that happened when I left A&MC, this is not boring you, is it?
Oh God, no.
Okay, I just want to be sure.
Getting ready for the questions.
The other thing that happened, so of course the work that I've been doing at Health Workforce Australia is workforce planning. So that was a big transition out of regulation and into workforce planning, a massive learning curve. I remember my first meeting at Health Workforce Australia, sitting there and thinking, just don't anyone ask me a question. Because I'm like a little sponge. I'm mopping, and any minute now I'll be ready, but just don't ask me a question right now. You've all been in that situation, haven't you? We've all had that feeling of thinking, I'm the new girl in here, and I'm really aware of my limitations. I'd never really done any workforce planning in the strictest sense of the word. The other thing that happened when I left A&MC is when I was coming to the end of the 6 months off, I had a phone call from Rosemary Bryant, who at the time, as you all know, was chief nurse of the whole wide world.
Pretty important phone call.
Pretty important phone call. Rosemary said to me, Karen, do you fancy a trip to Rwanda? And like a flash, grabbed that opportunity. I'd never been to Africa. I'd never been away from my family for any, length of time. I had no idea what was happening in Rwanda, but what did I say? Oh yes, thanks very much, Rosemary. Yes, I'll have a trip to Rwanda. Oh yes, that'd be lovely. What had happened is Rosemary had been over to Rwanda and met with the Minister for Health and the Council of Nursing over there, and the Minister for Health had said to Rosemary, do you know anyone who could come over and help the National Council of Nursing and Midwifery with some of their regulation stuff? Now, very well aware of what had happened and how I'd given up my career, Rosemary said, oh yes, I've got just the person for you. So anyway, I was approached by this organisation, Management Sciences for Health, an American crowd, and told what it was that I was supposed to do, which was go over and help the National Council of Nursing and Midwifery. 2 days before I actually left the country, my contract arrived and said that I was to go over there and develop a scope of practice document for every health profession in Rwanda. Oh. All right, I thought, never been a consultant before, never actually done this contractual stuff before, always just worked, in other places. Yeah, not really sure what happens. Gee, it's a bit late, I'm about to hop on the plane and it's the weekend in Rwanda. I guess I'll just go and see how it works out when I get there. So off I hopped, got myself to Rwanda, met the chief nurse who was spitting chips. Spitting chips. So the chief nurse and the registrar of the nursing council had quite a clear idea of what they needed doing, what help they needed from a consultant. Management Sciences for Health was in the country doing a 4-year program helping the entire health system, and one of their employees, who was, strangely enough, responsible for developing all the scope of practice documents, had managed to insert into my contract that that's what I would do, which was in fact her work. And the chap running the local office hadn't looked at the contract, he'd just signed off and sent it off. So the chief nurse was ready to take herself up the hill to the Minister for Health and create havoc about Management Sciences for Health, who were in country doing this for you. And I was a bit reluctant to bother the Minister for Health on this matter unless we couldn't sort it. So I sat down with the chief of staff in country, and I said to him, well, look, how about, he said, we're not about strengthening nursing, we're about strengthening the health system. So I said, well, how about if I don't just work with the Nursing Council, I'll work with all the allied health professions, I'll work with the doctors, I'll work with all the regulatory bodies and see what I can do for everyone in the next month, and we'll do it that way, and that'll strengthen. And then that way we've covered off on everything. And how about that? Would that work for you? Yes, that'd work for me. Back to the Nursing Council. Here's the deal I've struck with him. You guys will still get everything you want, and I'll squish the rest in as best I can. Will that work for you? Yes, lovely, lovely. And so the Minister for Health wasn't bothered, and I set about my business. And you'll love this next part. Guess which profession wouldn't even speak to me or meet with me or have me do anything for them? Yes, you're right, ladies and gentlemen, it was the doctors, because I'm a nurse. Now, the allied health people were happy to have help, the nurses, the lovely, but not the doctors. Anyway, I'm digressing. The reason for telling you about Rwanda is because this is what got me into workforce planning, which, as you know, I hadn't really sort of been very involved in. Part of what I did was each weekend I would go out into the countryside. I worked out if I could save my per diem, you know, the money you get for your meals, and I was really canny and ate at the local Rwandan restaurant at lunchtime, taking the registrar of the council with me because we had enough money to buy lunch for both of us. I could save money, and then on the weekends I could get a driver from the hotel and I could go out into the countryside and I could see what the countryside was like. And I went to the genocide memorials, and I went to the hospitals, and I went to the lake that explodes, and all of these sorts of bits and pieces. So I went to this hospital, a lovely hospital up on the hill outside Kigali, which is the capital. And we were walking around the grounds, and there was outside some of the buildings, there was all these massive big white tents, and there was washing hanging on the line, and there was food cooking, and there were kids running around, and there were women everywhere. And I said to the lady that was with me, what's this with all these tents outside the hospital? Oh, she said, that's all the women for the fistula clinic. So, of course, all the women from Rwanda, like you heard yesterday from Lucy, they'd walked uphill and down Dale to get to this regular fistula clinic. So they were there to have their obstetric fistulas repaired. And so when I met with the chief nurse and we talked about it, she said, well, the trouble, Karen, is that we don't have any midwifery care in the country. We've got nurses. The nurses would finish school at about year 10 and they did about a 1-year course. And that was the nursing course. So it wasn't like our course. It wasn't to that level. So they were running the health clinics out in the sticks. And so they were having to sort of try and help pregnant women as well. And of course they had no skills, absolutely no skills, no knowledge of any of this sort of thing. So Mary said to me, she said, what I've decided to do is to start up a midwifery course. She said, what I need is some direct entry midwives. She said, because we're changing the nursing course to become a 3-year course, so, so it's sort of international sort of standards. But she said, if I wait for those nurses to do that and then become midwives, she said, I've actually put off this preventative health care for these women by about 6 years. She said, but if I start a midwifery course now, in 3 years' time I'll have fully qualified midwives I can have around the country, and then I can actually top them up with a nursing course, because ultimately they're going to need both. And that was the first time that I had this sense about this workforce planning, about the community needs, the very real needs of the community, and how, you know, we absolutely need to plan our workforce to meet those community needs. And that was one of those amazing light bulb moments for me. So then coming back to Australia and then seizing an opportunity at ACT Health and then seizing an opportunity at HWA found me getting into this whole area of workforce planning. And it was largely because of seeing those women and talking to that chief nurse back in Rwanda. So that's kind of the story about, you know, the personal growth and the seizing of opportunities, and thank you for pointing that out, because I think that's what we all do and we all do so well. But the thing that I would like to talk with you about, and that I think it would be worth exploring, is how we as individuals can drive change, because I think we've all of us at some time or another been in a workplace and had a light bulb moment or had an idea and thought, here's the vision. And as Madrean said, you know, the management is, yes, doing it every day. Yes, we've restocked the cupboards. Yes, we've put in the paperwork. Yes, we've done that every day. But the leadership is about having the vision and thinking, you know what, there's actually a better way that we might be able to do this to deliver a better level of care for our patients. And how would we go about that?
I've been nursing well over 30 years, and 15 of those have been in general practice before I went into Medicare locals. But through our discussion here, what we decided that we'd like to dream to have going forward is we'd love to see every new nurse that comes into general practice, whether it's straight out of uni or from a hospital position, is that they're all provided with a mentor to work with them for the first few months in general practice, because I myself have seen so many that have come into general practice and haven't got a clue on how to cope, and they don't always have someone to work with them. They're just left there to sink or swim. So I think it's very important that they have that sort of mentoring to keep them interested in the profession and not scare them off, and to make them feel that they're an important part of the team.
Okay, so your dream is mentoring. If we can have each dream, and then and you can, Karen, I'm sure you'll disagree with me if I'm wrong, but and then let's go through the challenges and facilitators for your dream. Okay.
No, I haven't. All nurses who are new to general practice. So I think that's what Sharon said. They might
Oh, I thought I heard you.
be nurse for 30 years.
I heard you say that the GPs needed mentoring. That could be another project. Okay, next. Who wants to volunteer next as far as focus on the description of your dream, and then, okay.
I'm Robin Moore. I'm a practice management consultant and also a Medicare local board director, and also a registered nurse, previous Don in another life. Now, our dream actually came up from something that I said to the staff of one of my practices only 2 weeks ago, something that Jenny brought up in one of the workshops yesterday, and the fact that we actually have one sitting here. And Cheryl just provided some direction. So it was really, the subject's interesting. And it'll be no surprise that our dream is to increase nurse ownership of general practice businesses. I mean, who says it has to be owned by either corporate GPs? And there are many that aren't owned by medical people, that are, you know, some of them are non-medical, but let's say, what would we say? Don't include corporate. 90%, would that be a fair call? Would be, you know, there's doctor ownership. And of course Patrice is the practice nurse, manager, CEO, and she is married to a GP, but we excluded that from our dream. It's not a criteria at all. It's actually the disincentive. Sorry, with the greatest respect.
And you want to maybe put a nurse practitioner in there, don't you?
Oh, that comes down last.
Okay.
Our aim, right, of all this. So why do we want this? Because we want a nurse that and has a real say and can lead the strategic direction of that business and of that medical practice, who will have autonomy and trust, and to use, Patrice is saying, think like a CEO and act like a nurse. We like that one. So what would it take? And I mean, obviously it would take a lot. Obviously there would be some upskilling. So we're just speaking generally, upskilling. You know, you'd need...
So you've done your dream.
So
you've
that's the
identified your
dream.
dream. So then we'll go back to what it's going to take.
You don't want this yet?
Not, well, do we?
Get all the dreams.
Let's get all the
so
dreams.
that's
and
it.
Then, but hold that thought.
Just-
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Just in
Yeah.
case we run out of time, I want to get all the dreams, then come back and get all the barriers and neighbours.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Number 3.
Who wants to be next? Okay.
Hi, my name is Bev Hamilton, and I am in another life a primary health care nurse practitioner in a remote area, and have come back to Western Australia to help set up a primary health care clinic. And our dream is very much like your dream.
Wow.
We have
We
a
can
vision
combine
that,
dreams. That's okay.
that the government openly values and funds evidence-based nurse-led care models within that have defined outcomes within a practice that is not GP-led.
I'm sorry. It's my dream too. we have the models for this now. My dream, sorry to invade in your dream. My dream when I was new nurse practitioner working with physicians, and they gave me the leftover people that nobody else wanted to see, so I was given, and I was discouraged once in a while, And one of the receptionists in our office said, "What would you like to do?" And I said, "In 5 years, I want to have my own practice." And when I left after 20 years, there was a 6 weeks waiting. Not that that was good to see me, but, you know, this idea of doing that, great, yeah. Well, I like it anyway.
So do I.
For the purposes of recording this, because all of this information, what you put on those notes and what we write here will be going back to ACNA, that the government values and funds nurse-led clinics in primary... Nurse-led care models?
Yeah, with defined outcomes
Yes.
at the practice level, not led by GP.
That's a big box, isn't it? The not led by GPs.
Wow.
Are there other team members, or is it?
Are there other team members?
Oh, yes.
Yes, but just not GPs, just not GPs.
But
Yeah.
I guess that, you know, like, the experiences in GPs are not that, you know, like, they're not that reliable in getting what you need to have happen.
Yeah, we'll pursue that. Okay, the last group, what is your dream? Not the last group, but the fourth group?
We actually didn't have a dream because we were talking about all of our personal experiences, but I can tell you what one of my dreams might be. Sorry, but it kind of encompasses...
Your dream was to talk about your personal experiences.
No. I mean, I'm... Wendy says, I hope it's clean, which was surprising. So all I was just going to put forward was, I think it would be amazing if nurses were not an addendum to policy planning and service delivery, that we were
That's beautifully said.
pivotal to
That's
policy
beautifully said.
planning
Yeah.
and service delivery of nursing services and health services moving into the future.
That we are not an addenda. This is this, and by the way, we can include nurses too, or do whatever. That is beautiful. That's great. That's great. Okay. So,
Comment as well.
oh, okay.
Can you hear me? Jo from Liverpool Women's Health Centre. I'm also a nurse practitioner, and I've been working in women's health centres which actually have a non-doctor-led process. So we are non-government organisations, but I've been working in those organisations since 1995, and it very much is a multidisciplinary team-led model with I'm the only nurse. I have been always in the work that I've done in the Women's Health Centre movement, but Women's Health Centres were established in 1974 in Australia, and I think that they have provided some very good role models and policy planning, etc., around women's health and the way forward in women's health here in Australia, and very good from a nursing perspective as well.
Oh, thank you for that. Okay, yeah. So back to mentoring. Blockages or barriers and facilitators, or whatever your plan, part of your plan you'd like to mention.
Now, where's the microphone? Do you guys want to present what you identify as being...
And the other groups can help them. We don't have to be divided in the discussion now that we have the dreams out there. We
Do you
can...
want to start with telling us what you thought the barriers and blockages were, and then we can open it up to the whole room? Because Patrice is champing at the bit. Excellent. She said she'd do it for you.
One of the biggest barriers to have it within individual practices is the size and the capacity of the practice to have somebody on staff that can mentor a new nurse into general practice. As I said before, not necessarily a graduate, someone with 20 years experience. My own personal experience is I've only got that capacity because there's 5 of us on staff, and I've got a 10-year plus experienced general practice nurse who has mentored 2 new graduates over the last 18 months, and it's been a wonderful process to see these 2 beautiful new graduates, one UK trained, one Australian trained, blossom into fabulous primary healthcare nurses. But if I didn't have that nurse, my other nurse, of the same age and myself as a backup, we wouldn't be able to do it in the private business model. So there needs to be a mechanism that someone supports and funds this mentoring program on behalf of general practice, because small business general practices just could simply not afford to do it. And it would be too much of an impost on the mentor within the practice, because they've got so much to do in their daily job.
So the next step is, given the barrier, which you've just described, the next step is, what would you do? What's to do? There's money. Somebody has money someplace, or whatever, or a person, or whatever. So what would you do?
Could you just have that a nominated person be their go-to person? Like you have a transition program initially, and then they have a go-to person who's always there on the same days that they work, if they work part-time, that is available to them, should they come across any obstacles. Even.
So does the mentor have to be employed in the same practice? So which then takes me to another point, because there might be two issues here. One of them is your orientation of that practice, and the other one is your development as a general practice nurse. And so it does beg the question of whether you could set up mentoring frameworks through an organisation like APNA, where a member of APNA volunteers to become a mentor for another person. So the mentor might be in WA and the mentee might be in New South Wales, and it might be, a fixed term relationship, and then they still get their go-to person in the practice for the sort of day-to-day stuff happening in the practice. Is that a possibility?
There are so many variabilities in practices. So
Yes.
being a nurse in a single practice as opposed to being a nurse in a 20 doctor practice is two different things. So then APNA develops a base of champion mentors who are matched for their ability.
How long would you envision a mentoring? Is it a few months or a year or 2 years? So there has to be some flexibility.
Can I just say something?
I think it's important, if you're going to set up a mentoring relationship, that you're quite clear about what the outcomes are, what the expectations, what you're going to do. So I've just done a 6-month mentoring for a person who had been newly appointed as a CEO of an organisation. And we entered into a contract for 6 months. I met with her every fortnight, and we would have an agenda about what was to be discussed. And then when particular issues came up that needed attention, we would discuss those. Now, we've now finished that relationship. We may enter into another contract for something else, but that was a set finite period with clear outcomes, with clear agendas about what was to be done. And I think if you want it to succeed, you've literally got to do that. It is 3 o'clock.
I'm conscious that we're short. We had, if people, so does that help?
Can I just make one comment, because I think it's really important. You're talking about how to operationalise mentorship and supervision. I think if you want to lead as nurses in this, you need to take this to a strategic level, and it should be part of professional development as a mandatory process, and then it will be funded accordingly. Now that's sticking my head above the sand, but unless you can get an overarching approach to this from a strategic perspective, it'll continue to be fragmented across nursing altogether.
San Moses from APNA. And I just wanted to say, if we're talking about funding this sort of process, the last thing I would want to see is that the GPs actually control that somehow. So how do we position it so that it's not, a lot of it's tied to the carrot and stick model that we've got in general practice at the moment. So even though they obviously need to be involved, given that they own 90% of private practices at the moment in Australia, but how do we get this funding through and get their approval and get them on board to allow this to happen within their practices without them receiving the funds for it, and then we lose that control again of the funding?
So to me, I don't have the intricate knowledge of your system that you have, but to me that's again a development of strategic approach to get them on board. I mean, it's a challenge, but how do you do it? having, my current interest is in health policy and strategic approaches, but I think that overarching, but also maybe there's, if you can sell, this is just off the top of my head, if you can sell the idea to your champion GP, since your funding comes through the GP, and then how do you go out from there? I want other people to have a chance to say something, and one of the other, or two of the other dreams we had to do with, correct me if I'm wrong, had to do with practice models that didn't necessarily have to have GPs in the circle. Maybe they're consultants or maybe, yeah. So do you want to say something about that? Is that enough on the mentoring? I hate to rush you, and we can stay, but your tea break is going to start in a few
No, I
minutes.
can go through it quickly. And it's not limited to just this. In the Times, this is, so this is the dream. There'd need to be some upskilling in financial, strategic planning, business planning, governance, future funding models, getting your head around the whole thing, that sort of thing. You'd need to build credible professional networks, such as mentoring, learning from others, etc., etc. Finance, this is the big one, of course. You'd need to seek a supportive financer, best friend. Who's going to be your financial best friend? And to do that, you're probably going to have to come up with a business plan, which is where you could use your mentoring and networks, because there are practice managers and nurses out there who are owners. And obviously, you need to look at every funding opportunity, such as government funding. But that group up there has changed the funding, so we're going to be able to actually be funded. Right.
Which group up there? That one? Or,
That one.
Okay. Ken's group.
Sorry, what was that, Jenny? Oh, yeah, the Bechtel. I thought you said Canberra for a minute. I nearly got excited. No. Finally, be clear on what it is you and perhaps your family are prepared to risk as a business owner. And lastly, we had recruit and appoint like-minded health professionals and staff.
Thank you. I've heard strategic plan mentioned several times, and if it helps for me to share, based on the research I did in Singapore and looking at the literature and the theoretical approaches to any of this, it's a strategic action plan. We do have a tendency to just go, well, we'll do this and we'll do that and we'll educate the nurses, and then, oh, by the way, the government said right now we've got all this money, but it doesn't match up. So just thinking about it and defining what people will do. What else about the GP, minus the GP practice model, sorry.
I guess what's happening in Western Australia, it may or may not be happening here, is that they're incentivising medical officers, GPs to go to country areas. But they're not incentivising them to be really engaged in good primary healthcare outcomes. It's more about being engaged in emergency departments, working on rosters in emergency departments and providing that sort of care to the tune of something like $50,000 a year for working 1 day a week in an emergency department. So you could really use those funds that are already existing as incentives to turn that around, so that they wouldn't be funding anything more than what they're funding now, and you could manage on outcomes. So what you would do, I think, is set up the practice under that environment. So your GP, you would buy in the services of a GP because you can't do without them. So on whatever basis that you need them and however you manage your practice, you would get them all ready for your GP, then buy in his daily services and tell him what he was going to be doing for that day,
It's not a joke. We have these models in the U.S.
Yeah.
We pay them by the hour.
Yeah.
There's several reasons for that. Part of it has to be with some of the history of our collaborative practice agreements. But, the downside of that can be that you're paying them for consultations, and they may be a little lazy about doing their part, but you've still got the GP name on your reports or whatever.
Essentially in Australia, a lot of practices, that is essentially what we do with general practitioners. There's 10 doctors at that's essentially, would you agree, that the doctor bills to MBS, I get all of the money, and then I give them some of the money back, and in return they get a receptionist, a nurse, a chair, a room, a da-da-da-da-da. That's how it works in a lot of practices in Australia. So I just, I wonder whether we're saying, picking on GPs, I wonder whether we should be just saying that it shouldn't be owned by one particular professional, that a true collaboration, a true primary healthcare practice has to have equal input and ownership and belief from every profession that is.
Well, there's probably possibilities for both models. I myself would like to see how this model of just hiring a doctor once in a while for consultation would work. And it's a model we have, and it's working. You might end up paying them more than you want. I haven't worked with very many doctors or physicians where they see themselves as on parity with the nurses. So that's the other challenge. But you could find someone like that. I mean, you do need a champion, I think, or champions, and you don't need to sell your soul, but you may need to compromise and do some negotiation if you're setting up your model to begin with, and then you tweak it as you go along. But I think there's possibilities in both those models.
And I guess the other thing, the way that it works in Australia too, is just recognising that there is a finite amount of money that comes into a business, and whoever owns the business, it's the nurse, the doctor, the pharmacist down the road, is going to want a return on their investment for the heartache that they've got. So that's, and it is. I call ours an albatross. We need to become
business savvy. We can't just like fly on a wing and a prayer. I mean, we really need to be policy savvy and business savvy, you know, and you can go work in a hospital or someplace else and just let somebody else make the decisions, but you really need to be involved in the decisions and be visible. And that probably means people are going to come along and say, you're not a nurse anymore, why are you doing this? But I think developing action plans and developing a model that you'd like to try, and then doing, I think Karen alluded to this, then evaluating as time goes on. It may not be the answer in the beginning, and you may have to adjust as you go along. I don't know if that fits for what you were thinking. And the dreamers that were having individual dreams, I don't know what you're doing, but did you have any comment on what's being discussed as far as these other dreams are concerned? I know you had a comment on overarching action. That's right. You don't know about unanticipated. Yes.
Well, can I just ask? Sorry. Can I ask? Can everybody hear me better? Can I ask whether or not in the United States there are more nurse-led clinics that are corporatised or owned by the nurses?
Yes.
And how does that work?
And the key is one of our keys, and they're usually nurse practitioner led. So you've got that, and it's the nurse practitioner, I'd have to say graduate level prepared nurse that is the leader. They're pretty business savvy. We weren't in the beginning because I was a business partner with the practice, and I learned a lot because I didn't know much. But there are models for it, and successful models. And if I heard you properly, there's always a concern, are you going to go belly up and you're not going to meet your bills, or, you know. So the issue would be, wouldn't it, to develop an action plan so that the risk is very low that you would go belly up, and that's a matter of some kind of planning. You mentioned business management, or somebody mentioned a business manager. Well, you don't have to do it all. You know, you can get someone to help you. But yes, we have increasing, I mean, with that many nurse practitioners, and with actually the opposition by the American Medical Association, not necessarily doctors, but the American Medical Association, we have become very resilient and much stronger. But we now have, for our graduate students, business planning and policy planning and all that kind of thing. And you probably have in some of your programs too. But I think, you know, you've got to have something to look at to to have a sense of what went wrong and what went right.
Can I just share a tiny little story? When Karen's going to love this. In a 2-week period in 1997 or 90.
Thank you.
In a 2-week period in 1998, we sold a house, bought a car, got pregnant with our first child, and bought the practice within a fortnight period. And then I had 2 more children in 3 years, not 4 years. Karen, that was for you. Crazy. When I was pregnant with my second child, so my first one was 10 and a half months old, I went back. I was a midwife, absolutely loved my midwifery days. I went back to work on a casual shift on a Friday night in operating theatres attached to labour ward. We did a couple of cases. I got a little bit sloppy and I didn't put the policy was the baby's name tag had to be in the middle of its back, pointing up that way so that when you turn the baby around you could read it, baby born, blah, blah, blah. I think I'd put it on upside down or a little bit sideways. The assistant nurse made her way down from the ward once it had been checked in to seek me out to tell me that I had done that wrongly, even though I had actually given her a job a couple of years before. And my light bulb moment was, hang on a minute, I'm growing a family here, we've got a business, I haven't seen my husband since he got me pregnant last time because he's so busy. What am I going to do? If I've got 8 or 16 hours in the week where I want to continue my career, is it going to be here, getting into trouble for putting a back tag on crooked, or is it going to be in our business because that's where he's going to be all of the time and I want him to come home happy? So that was the last shift I ever worked in the hospital, and I miss being a midwife, but the first thing I did was enrol myself for a Cert 4 in practice management and spent that whole pregnancy studying and gaining the skills that I needed to gain to be his boss. So because I was so bad at putting baby tags on. So that was my tag, but I'm still, if I hadn't had my nursing moment at that time, I would probably still be working as a midwife 2 or 3 shifts a week to fulfil my own personal things. So that's how I got to where
I think
managing.
personal experiences do intersect with the decisions we make professionally.
So I've got that assistant nurse to thank. I should go back to her now,
Yeah,
16 years
thank you
later,
very
and say
much.
thank you for that.
May I ask, so we can talk, we're in a safe place here, we can dream all we want. Can you imagine, though, taking your dream and putting it into action, or putting parts of it into action? Can you imagine that? Does it seem possible?
We can imagine you putting it into action.
Okay, I'll be glad to come and help you. I'll tell you, I was telling an aside with Karen. So when I was in a business practice, and if you need to go and have tea, go ahead. I was a business partner. We were merging with another practice. I was the only nurse and the only woman to begin with, and then we had some female doctors. And they didn't want a nurse to be the business partner in the new merger. And they brought me into boardrooms, tried to intimidate me, all sorts of things. And in the end, and we're talking about 150 doctors that were going to be part of this merger. And because I could see what they were doing and I objected and I wouldn't give in, the whole merger collapsed. So, I mean, and not that it was my intent. My intent was just to be treated fairly. But, I feel so passionate, and not everybody's a risk taker. I'm a pretty big risk taker most of the time, and I guess outspoken. But, and you have to pick and choose your battles. But I do think for those of you who have these wonderful dreams, that we need to be more visible and pursue pieces of it and not, okay, so your funding system says you have to do this. Well, what's your way around it? How do you intersect with that so it works for you? Nurses are a valuable resource for the patient populations around the world, and we keep giving that resource away to somebody else to make decisions. In the United States, oftentimes we've got people that know nothing about healthcare at all making decisions about what happens to nursing. And it happens a lot, especially with the emergence of the nurse practitioner role. I don't know if this happened here, but I object to that because, it's like having my husband tell me what to do when he was alive. So I think if you have the courage and if you have the passion and you have the know-how of your system, maybe you need to do something. You sit together and develop a plan and so forth. I challenge you, as you leave this room. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you very much. And I wish you well. Well, I'm not the facilitator, that's right, I forgot.
She's on a roll.
So please thank Madrean and Karen.